In today's video, we have a lot to cover, including a potential huge trade we might see between the Habs and the Capitals this offseason. We also have trade rumors involving the St. Louis Blues and some free agent rumors concerning Marc Andre Fleury possibly heading back to Pittsburgh. We also have some big updates that could have a major impact on the Ottawa Senators making some progress towards the new downtown arena. We also have several updates on some injuries and college prospects either signing in the NHL or going back to school. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news and rumors to talk about here today, but before we jump into all that, I just want to take a quick moment here and acknowledge a couple of important anniversaries in my opinion. Today is the 4-year anniversary from the Humboldt Broncos tragic bus accident that happened. Obviously, we saw many players' lives were majorly impacted. We were several, deaths involved in the accident, several really serious injuries. Obviously a lot of people still dealing with the ramifications from this accident here today. It was certainly a very tragic moment with a lot of impact in the hockey community. So I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the 4-year anniversary of that. Certainly, it's also the 2-year anniversary of the tragic passing of young Colby Cave, of course, who was also, an Edmonton Oiler and a Boston Bruin hockey player, was only in his mid-20s, tragically, suddenly passed away very unexpectedly. So certainly life happens fast and you just never know what can happen today, tomorrow. So certainly, take a moment and reflect and, certainly acknowledge these important anniversaries. Now into today's news. Let's start here with several injury updates. We saw a potential injury last night to another Leaf goaltender, although it appears as though it may not be serious and he may not miss any action. But of course, they had young goaltender Erik Kallgren in last night playing the Florida Panthers. The Leafs had a 5-1 lead and they had a major epic collapse and they ended up losing the game 7-6 in overtime. The Panthers came all the way back and tied the game up, then took the lead. Leafs then later tied it overtime, and Huberdeau ended it at one point, though I believe it was after 3 goals, or maybe it was 4, I can't remember now. Kallgren was pulled out of the game due to concerns over contact there in the head. So Sheldon Keefe has said since then that he was basically kind of just stunned from the impact, but he appears to be okay, so it doesn't look like he's going to miss any time. But that would be absolutely devastating for this Leafs team. I mean, obviously Jack Campbell came in relief, didn't really fare any better. Had a good first game back the other night, but still, that would leave Campbell kind of on his own. They're already without Mrazek, who hadn't played well anyway, but he's going to be out for like at least 6 weeks. Who else? They'd have to bring up Hutchison most likely. A lot of their younger goalies, like Joseph Wall, is out injured. Ian Scott has barely played the last couple of years. They've got Keith Petruzzelli, who's only not even on an NHL 2-way contract, so he can't even be called up. They do have technically Carter Hutton, but he's not even playing in Toronto. He could be brought in, but he really hasn't even played a ton either. So they'd be in a heap of trouble, in my opinion. Campbell's a good goalie, but he can't play every single night. So, that would have a major impact. But thankfully, it looks like the youngster's going to be okay. So let's kind of hope for the Leafs' sake that is the case and he's not out. But I tell you, that was quite the game last night between Toronto and Florida. I know the coaches probably didn't enjoy it too much because of all the goals, and obviously that means there was lots of different assignments missed and mistakes, etc. But if that was a playoff series and went 6-7 games, it would be highly entertaining for the fans, that's for sure. Since 2013, Game 7, when the Bruins had their epic comeback win over the Maple Leafs, they have had 7 leads of 4-1 or more where they've blown the lead and lost the game, which is way more than any other NHL franchise. I believe the next most was 4 over that same period of time. In this case, it was 5-1. So as much as they've played really well lately, they still have a good record. I don't think there's any reason for the Leafs or their fans to panic, but they have unfortunately become this team that seems to be on blowing leads, and it's hard to wrap your head around. It's hard to understand. From Florida's perspective, though, at the same time, they were down 5-1, and they had to rely on heavy scoring, which is they came back from a 4-1 against New Jersey not long ago too. So their goaltending hasn't been great. It's been shaky too. So at the same time, I do have concerns for both teams going into the playoffs, but you just don't know how this is going to work out, but it could be highly entertaining for the fans with lots of goals and, two very, very highly skilled offensive teams. So we'll see how things go in the playoffs, but it looks like the Leafs might have dodged a major bullet there when it comes to their goalie being hurt. Jack Hughes is done for the season, sprained MCL for the young New Jersey Devil star, having a solid campaign. He's really turning into, a lot more the player that they thought they were getting when he was drafted first overall, so he's really coming into his own. It's unfortunate that he won't be able to finish things out to see where, just how strong he could finish, but he'll be back next year better than ever, I'm sure. But the sprained MCL will keep him out the rest of the year. Carey Price is going to be traveling with the Montreal Canadiens on their upcoming 2-game trip. He's not expected to play, which means he's likely not even going to back up. But the fact he's starting to travel with the team, he's been practicing more and more, does look promising that he will be able to get in a few games here before the end of the year. We've talked a lot about that lately, what that could mean for the future. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and kind of see where things go. As I mentioned as well, we have lots of updates here on several, top prospects that are college hockey players. And of course, they can't sign contracts, so their U.S. college hockey season is over. Some of these players, their season is done, and they're trying to make a decision. Others are still going here. But the Buffalo Sabres, it looks like Devin Levi, their top goalie prospect, who they got from Florida in the Sam Reinhart trade, will be returning to Northeastern for another season. So again, there's no big concern. They still own his rights for 2 more years. So there's no need to panic there on that front at all. But certainly, another college season appears to be in store for him. Montreal, of course, got Jordan Harris. They're waiting on Jaden Struble. Seems to be about a 50-50 chance right now of which way he's going. But even if he goes back to school, I would not, again, worry about that. Due to his connection there with Ken Hughes, I would not be concerned. There's a good relationship. And there's no concern about him, trying to avoid signing with Montreal at all. The Leafs are waiting on Matthew Nyes. Now, of course, there was quite a while there, a few weeks back, it was kind of heavily expected that the Leafs would sign him to come out of the University of Minnesota and join the team ahead of the playoffs, but it doesn't really look like that's likely going to be the case right now. I've seen different reports, including Darren Dreger of TSN, indicating that it looks like he's leaning towards staying in school another season. I mean, he could have a change of heart, but right now all indications point that he's not signing with the Leafs and likely staying in school another season. Of course, the Seattle Kraken have Matty Beniers as well from Michigan, so we're waiting to find out on him. I think there's a decent chance he turns pro, but we don't know for sure. Same goes for Owen Power, of course. It's expected he's going to sign with the Buffalo Sabres, last year's number 1 overall pick. Of course, after completing 1 year in college after being drafted, likely expected to sign and join the Buffalo Sabres. And University of North Dakota defenseman Tyler Clevin, who's an Ottawa Senators prospect, where they've had several prospects at that school recently. It seems almost a guarantee that he's going back for another season as well for year 3. So again, no big concern there. There's nothing to indicate that he won't sign with the Sens once he's ready to make the jump to pro hockey. So that's kind of all your updates on that front. And of course, we get some big updates, at least what appears to be a potential big update on some good news involving the Ottawa Senators and potentially making some progress towards their downtown arena, LeBreton Flats. Now, of course, there's a lot here that is yet to be confirmed, so take this for what you will. But we do know that there's been a lot of interesting news around the Sens here since the passing of Eugene Melnyk, about the possibility of playing games in Quebec City next season, about the Quebec City and Ottawa joint bid for World Juniors, and we get some more updates on that here today. Apparently, the Ottawa Senators have decided to pivot away from the Quebec City joint bid for the World Juniors, and they've instead decided to partner with OSEG. So, of course, OSEG owns the Ottawa 67s and the Ottawa Red Blacks CFL franchise. So, essentially, they will keep the event entirely in Ottawa if the bid is successful. Of course, they have the Canadian Tire Center where the Ottawa Senators play. Then, of course, they also have the arena, which I believe is called TD Place, which is where the 67s play. So to me, based on all the different bids across the country that are likely being considered, those 2 arenas would give them the largest seating capacity compared to any other bids. I mean, there's rumored to be some stiff competition from a joint bid between Moncton and Halifax. Vancouver and Victoria appear to be doing a joint bid, and there's also talk in Saskatchewan. I believe, I'm not sure if it's Saskatoon and Regina or how that's working, but there is a bid coming out of that province as well. And actually another bid in Ontario, which I believe was Kitchener in London, perhaps. I can't remember exactly which teams were together. I think those were the ones that were teaming up, or at least rumored to be. So the good news here is simply this. Now, of course, to see the Ottawa Senators working with OSEG is... it's big news. Of course, in case you don't remember, when Eugene Melnyk attempted to do a bid before for the LeBreton Flats deal, he was working with John Ruddy. John Ruddy is the founder of Trinity Developments, which is Canada's largest commercial real estate company. They own a ton of commercial real estate, malls, strip malls, etc. across Canada. A major company, and obviously will be trying to get their hand into being a big part of the development at LeBreton Flats. Ruddy obviously would be a very important partner, but they did not end up really working well together, and that whole relationship and bid ended up in lawsuits against each other. So the Sens currently, I'm not sure it's actually against the Sens directly, it's the way the company structure is, but there is a lawsuit pending from, I believe, from Trinity, or from that group that was the way they had it structured against Melnyk. So that obviously is pending. We're waiting to see how that goes. But we're wondering here with this that maybe we'll see the lawsuits possibly even drop now that Eugene's no longer with us. And we're seeing these two work together a little bit again. Of course, Anthony LeBlanc, who's the president of business operations on the business side of the Senators, apparently has a real good relationship with a high-ranking member of OSEG, Mark Goody. So that might have been helping kind of massage things here. But if they're working together on a joint bid for the World Juniors, which takes them back to 2009 when they were able to work together at that point and host the most successful World Junior tournament in Canada up to that point, they're trying to do this again. And there's been a lot of talk that there has been a bid recently put forth by the Senators, because the LeBreton Flats is open with the NCC again here, and there is a meeting tomorrow. Now, it doesn't look like we're going to really learn a whole lot tomorrow in regards to the Senators' bid, or even confirming that they've bid, because everything's very secretive and hush-hush right now. They're not really releasing anything. It's believed that they're going to be talking about this and kind of reviewing things further, but I don't think they're going to be releasing much of anything, or possibly nothing, to the public as early as tomorrow. But it just goes to show that these potential very important partners for the Senators in helping get this arena developed, that they're a better relationship, more cordial, and could they work together for that as well, like they were trying to do before. So as much as I said, it's really unfortunate to see what happened here with Eugene Melnyk passing away. But like I said, if there is a positive spinoff of that, is, could there, be other parties come involved to kind of help this team kind of, take the steps that Eugene might have been having trouble getting finished, to take this team to the next level when it comes to the downtown arena and all that. So it's certainly very positive news. At the very least, they might be having a real solid chance of hosting the World Juniors, and just the fact that they're collaborating with this company again, and working with the people there that they previously were having a strained relationship with, could be a major development in taking a step forward to getting the LeBreton Flats downtown arena for the Ottawa Senators sometime in the near future. Now, as we talked about as well, we have some NHL trade talk and free agent talk here as well. Elliot Friedman's latest written version of 32 Thoughts blog came out, and one of the interesting tidbits he mentioned was in free agency this year, he could see Marc Andre Fleury returning to his roots with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, of course, he's currently with the Minnesota Wild, and of course, he put a caveat there that's assuming he does not stay in Minnesota. We know that Fleury has a long-standing relationship with GM Bill Guerin, because they were both in Pittsburgh together a long time, so they're obviously very familiar with each other in that front. So if things go really well in Minnesota and he really likes it, Guerin might try to keep him in the fold there. That would not be shocking or surprising, and there is a possibility Fleury might not even hit free agency. That's just a fact of what could actually end up happening. But if indeed he does, if you look at the Penguins' goaltending tandem, of course, Tristan Jarry, it's obviously solidified that number one spot, but the backup role, Casey DeSmith, is certainly, I don't think that the Penguins would be opposed to upgrading to Fleury over DeSmith. But of course, a lot of it's going to boil down to money as well. Fleury's still a pretty big name, making pretty good coin, so he may not want to come down to the point that the Penguins can even afford him, but it's certainly something that would be something to look out for sure. So, obviously Elliott didn't have any inside information to say for sure that he thinks this is going to happen. This is strictly his opinion, but it does make a lot of sense. There has been a connection of Fleury back to the Penguins really ever since he was first rumored to be leaving Vegas and that they were going to be trading him. So we'll see where this goes, but I think a lot of it's going to be dependent here on the rest of this regular season playoff run with Minnesota and whether or not the Wild feel like they can afford to keep him. Do they want to keep him? And will his relationship with Guerin kind of have an impact there? So we'll see on that front. Now, as I mentioned as well, a lot of talk around the St. Louis Blues and their pending free agent goalie, Ville Husso. Now, the big thing with Ville Husso is to keep him and sign him to a decent contract that he's going to want. It might involve having to trade Jordan Binnington, who won them the Stanley Cup just a few years back. Clearly, Binnington has not been as good as Husso here this year, and it's certainly a real possibility that GM Doug Armstrong may not have any choice but to explore this or risk losing Husso in free agency. I've seen a number of reports indicating that there's a lot of teams would be showing interest in Husso as a free agent if he makes it there, and that's no surprise. I mean, he's in his mid-20s, certainly coming off a couple of years of having more regular NHL play, getting himself more established, and as much as he may not be able to command like a super big contract because, there's still sample size is small. At the same time, there's lots of teams going to be looking for goalies. You could throw Edmonton into the mix because obviously, regardless of what happens this year, Koskinen's off the books. There's a good chance that they get Mike Smith out $2 million next year, but they're still going to have room for another goalie in their system. And they're not the only ones. There's lots of other teams out there that might be looking for goalie based on free agency and different trades. It looks like the goalie market could be very, very, very active in the summertime. So clearly, that could open up some doors for a Jordan Binnington trade out of St. Louis. But I caution you that this playoff run and this playoff series that's coming up here for the Blues, assuming they clinch because they're in a good spot to do so, it could be crucial to either of their careers. If Ville Husso goes in any kind of run close to what Binnington did, that's just going to up his value and make things more interesting. At the same time, if Binnington for some reason gets the net back and he's the one playing the games and they go on a run, could also make a major impact. And I just don't know that the Blues can really afford to keep Husso and without moving Binnington's contract. So it will be interesting to see how things go. It was not long ago when the shoe was on the other foot here, and Binnington was the guy stealing the net from Jake Allen, and like I said, a few years later, the same thing's happening to him, but that tends to happen a lot in the NHL as the time goes by. So at that point, Ville Husso was fully expected to be the goalie of the future, not Binnington, and things kind of took a change there for a couple of years, but Husso is finally coming into his own. Then lastly, could we see a big trade involving the Capitals and the Canadiens? Now, clearly there's a lot of talk here about Ilya Samsonov. Now, there's another article I was reading today in The Athletic from Tariq El-Bashir talking about the goaltending tandem of Vanecek and Samsonov going into next year, and he does not see the Capitals coming back with the same tandem. In fact, many people are surprised we didn't see a goalie trade involving the Capitals at the NHL trade deadline. A lot of insiders and reporters were convinced that the Capitals did not feel comfortable going into the playoffs with these two goaltenders, and that they wanted to maybe consider moving one for some more experience. Obviously, Vitek Vanecek has been, probably fair to say, gained a lot more confidence in his coaching staff, in himself recently with how he's played, whereas Samsonov has been inconsistent, a little bit of a mystery, and certainly is not really seizing that opportunity to grab the reins as a solid C's number one goaltender like he was expected to be over the last couple of years. Really, ever since they moved on from Braden Holtby, it was expected to be Samsonov's net, and he's had his times where he's been brilliant and really looked real good, and he's had his times where he just doesn't deserve to be that guy, and Vanecek's been able to get a lot more playing time and kind of scoop in there. So certainly it leaves a lot of questions. So this article goes over the possibility of maybe seeing a Samsonov trade in the offseason, indicating there were a lot of whispers concerning that around the NHL trade deadline, and kind of revisits the connection to the Montreal Canadiens that we did talk about around deadline time. There was a lot of rumors flying around about Samsonov to the Habs. We've talked about it here multiple occasions, and he feels like there's a decent chance that something like that could be revisited. You would have to think, based on the article and logically, that they'd want a veteran netminder back in return. So you'd have to think at that point, Montreal, to get Samsonov, would likely have to be willing to part with Jake Allen. I can't see Carey Price being involved in any kind of trade in this case due to the contract and the complexity of everything that would take to get him there. We talked recently about the Price's future and maybe not being in Montreal next year, and I wouldn't completely rule that out. But at the same time, I don't see Washington as being the landing spot for him. So I think that kind of really complicates things. And of course, he has a no-move clause, would have to okay it anyway. But still, we don't know the future of Price. There's a lot of speculation around it. But still, it's a situation where we could see that kind of a deal. I mean, Montreal does, eventually need a young goalie to take over. They've been kind of waiting on Caden Primo. Clearly, he's not quite ready yet. And Samsonov, who's a little bit older, a little bit more established, if he can find his game in Montreal, that could be a good find. Now, I'm not suggesting this would be a Samsonov for Allen 1-for-1 trade if something like that took place. I think there would have to be other pieces involved. As much as Jake's a good, solid goalie for the Habs, I mean, they're not going to give him up and get Samsonov 1-for-1. Samsonov still is a real solid young goaltender with a bright future. I think they would have to include more pieces. And the Washington, as a whole, would probably want to find a way to get a little bit younger. They are an older team. So certainly Montreal's got lots of draft picks. There's some interesting young players that they might be willing to part with for the right deal. So we could see, a multiple piece trade that would end up bringing Ilya Samsonov to Montreal. I would not completely rule that out, but there are other teams as well. Plenty of teams will be interested if the Capitals do make it known that Samsonov could be available for trade. But again, like I've said about everybody else here, I think their play in the playoffs could have a big impact on how things go in the offseason for sure. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.